Welcome back to the place where smart people get their news from smart people like Richard Wolff. Professor Richard Wolff is on the line with us, the economist, the co-founder, Democracy at Work, author most recently of Capitalism's Crisis Deepens, Essays on the Global Economic Meltdown. His website, democracyatwork.info or rdwolff with 2fs.com. You can tweet him at Prof. Wolff, P-R-O-F-W-O-L-F-F. Dr. Wolff, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be here.
It is so nice to have you with us. I wanted to conflate two issues and drop them in your lap and get your thoughts on it. On the one hand, we are very close to, in my opinion, returning to a Lochner-era court where everything literally from Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, workman's compensation, unemployment compensation, workplace safety rules, all of these, environmental regulations, all of these things could simply be struck down by the court and revert to the states, where we might end up with California and New York being nice places to live and the rest of the country turning into Bangladesh. So we've got that on the one hand. And then on the other hand, we've got this piece in today's Washington Post that points out that we're already halfway there. Only, and I'm quoting this by Andrew Van Dam, and it's titled, "It's Great to Be a Worker in the U.S." No, not compared with the rest of the developed world. And they looked at us versus all the other 34 OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the 34 richest countries. Only Spain and Greece, ravaged by the Eurozone crisis, have more households earning less than half the nation's median income, and the United States. The United States and Mexico are the only countries that don't require advance notice for individual firings. We rank at the bottom of employee protections for mass layoffs. When you lose your job in the United States, I'm quoting from this article, it's harder to find another. Even when Americans do find another job, their earnings don't recover. U.S. unemployment benefits provide less support in the first year of unemployment than those in any other country in the world. Only 12% of U.S. workers are covered by the unions, collective bargaining. We're down there with Turkey and Lithuania. And workers' share of national income has dropped 8 percentage points since 1995. That puts us right there with Poland. Where does this lead? What does this mean for this country?
Well, it does. It speaks to several things. For the first, it clarifies what seems to mystify all kinds of commentators, that on the one hand, we have an official unemployment rate as low as it has been able to get for most of the post-World War II period. On the other hand, we have an enormous part of our population bitter, angry, dissatisfied, and able to point to a pinched standard of living, notwithstanding these unemployment numbers. And this is supposed to be a mystery. But of course it isn't, as the OECD documents and the Washington Post story make so clear. Because the minute you go beneath the gross number, the aggregate number of unemployed, and look at what people are actually doing, then you quickly discover that over the last 25 years, good jobs, that is, jobs that are secure, jobs that have plenty of benefits, jobs that are interesting and take place in an environment that doesn't make you sick, have been given up and lost by the tens of millions to be replaced by jobs that are insecure, even to the point of not knowing, as millions of Americans don't, how many hours they'll work next week, whether those hours will be consistent with their child care responsibilities or not. Excuse me. They don't have any benefits to speak of, including the future, the pension that they may have to face in the years ahead. And so, yes, they have a job, but everything that a job was supposed to provide has been taken away or at least reduced. And so you have this upset, this anger, this bitterness. And what the Washington Post story nicely also adds to this is that we are at the bottom of the heap, as your comparisons showed, when it comes to doing anything for people who are either unemployed or are faced with jobs that can't provide them with enough. The government has been cut back. And I think it is not anymore, as it used to be, an exaggeration to say what you said about New York and California and maybe a few other places being the favored places and the rest of the country a kind of neglected backwater. That scenario that exists in countries we used to think were light years behind us is now coming home like chickens to roost, because we have a government so completely run by and subservient to corporate America that they will do anything to save the costs and to increase the profits of those who are their patrons, and to let the chips fall where they may. And all the Washington Post did today was show you where those chips are and who they're falling on.
You are not only an economist, I think of you as a, you know, we don't have a good kind of secular word for it, but a prophet or a seer. In other words, you're able to look at the trends of history, long trends, multi-generational trends, multi-century trends of history, put them in both an economic and a political frame and draw conclusions that could be called predictive. The question I've been asking for the last hour and a half on this program is, are we on the verge of, or are we already there, of this country literally being torn apart? You know, we had Nancy MacLean on, the author of Democracy in Chains, and she talked about how you know, one of these petro-billionaires was actually saying that he was in favor of individual states engaging in mass secession from the United States as another way of diminishing federal power and authority. To what extent do you think that we are looking at essentially a second civil war, not necessarily one where people are shooting at each other, although, you know, people actually are already killing each other. We had this woman killed in the Charlottesville, Virginia, you know, tiki torch rally. But a tearing apart of this country that goes beyond simply, you know, the reality right now that women living in Mississippi are more likely to die in childbirth in the United States than they are even in many third world countries. You know, 300% more likely to die in childbirth than in Canada or in California. I mean, we're already sort of there, but, you know, do you see this just ripping this country apart?
At this point, I think there is no basis other than to answer your question, yes. I come at it with the same kind of question, but a slightly different angle. In my head, as I look at history, I see glorious empires, the Greek, the Roman, the Russian, the British, and now the United States display the same situation, an explosive growth from humble beginnings, a revelation of the possibility of wealth beyond anything they had imagined, the enjoyment of that wealth, the beginning to see the accumulation of wealth pretty much as an end in itself, and then the inevitable overreach, the misunderstanding that the real wealth of a nation is always its people, not its machines, not its navy, et cetera, et cetera. And so then in each case, adventures abroad that become more difficult, more expensive, and can't be won. But even worse, using up resources that might otherwise have held the domestic society together but aren't available for that, so that the domestic conflicts are not managed. And so the two sides, foreign and domestic, feed each other, while those at the top, with wealth beyond their imaginations, keep thinking everything's okay, everything will work itself out, until that day comes when it all crashes. And I see that, and this is not me. I don't normally look like this about these things. I'm not an alarmist. I think history works slowly. But I have become convinced over the last several years that this time really is different, that we are not, we don't have a way out. I don't see one. And the conservative and middle-of-the-road economists that I speak with as a regular part of my life, we don't agree on how we got into this mess, and we don't agree on how to get out of it. But what we do agree on, which amazes us, is that this is the worst condition of the American economy that any of us have ever experienced in our lives, and we all have gray hair. So this is indeed a perception you have that a greater number of people are beginning to share, and with each passing day's headlines, you see more and more evidence. You mentioned a woman in the South. I was struck over the last few days by the story of the woman trapped by a subway in Boston, who, in pain and bleeding, pleads with the people around her not to get the expensive ambulance because she can't afford it. Could they find her an ambulance that will get her to the hospital less expensively? I mean, it tore my heart out to understand we've reached that level of privation and inequality in this society.
Yeah, it truly is a disaster, sir. We have just 20 seconds, so we hit a hard break here. Jared Bernstein had invited me to the White House during the Obama presidency when he was the chief economist for Joe Biden, and we had a lengthy conversation and debate, frankly, about some of the policies. He's now saying he thinks a Great Depression is inevitable in the next year or two. Do you agree with that?
I think that if you push through these tariffs and trade wars, together with whatever else is going on, this is a dying empire flailing around, and it could set off cataclysms beyond anything we have foreseen.
Wow. Professor Richard Wolff, economist, co-founder of Democracy at Work, author of Capitalism's Crisis Deepens, democracyatwork.info. Thank you, Dr. Wolff.